Ryan didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. He just set down his wine glass, folded his napkin like we were finishing brunch, and said it. "You've got 7 days to move out." I didn't speak. Neither did my parents. George, my father, stayed focused on the gravy boat like it held some secret to escape. Margaret, my mother, twisted her cloth napkin until it looked like rope. No one looked at me. It was a quiet Sunday evening in the dining room we all pretended hadn't changed. The candlelight flickered against the wood-paneled walls, casting soft shadows over the china cabinet. My chicken was still warm. The lemon tart I'd baked sat untouched in the center of the table. The air smelled like rosemary and powdered sugar. And my brother Ryan Whitaker, 36 fresh from a Denver divorce, was grinning like he'd just been promoted. I took a breath, reached down beside me past my chair, and lifted the old VHS case I'd slid into my tote that morning. Black plastic scuffed at the corners, a leftover from our childhood movie nights. I clicked it open slow and steady like I was about to play the feature presentation. Instead, I pulled out a cream-colored folder. Thick, worn, edged with tabs. I didn't raise my voice either. Actually, I said, placing the folder beside my plate, "This house isn't yours to give." Ryan blinked. My mother's fork slipped clinking against her plate. My father finally looked up, brows knotted like he'd just realized he was late for something. I didn't move. Funny thing about ownership. Sometimes it has nothing to do with names on paper and everything to do with who people choose to believe. It started slow, like most things that fall apart. 3 years ago, the house was slipping, though no one said the word foreclosure out loud. Dad George had funneled most of his retirement into some oil startup a coworker swore would explode any day now. It exploded all right, into dust. Mom Margaret had been in and out of the hospital after her second heart episode. The bills stacked faster than she could open them. I found them one morning tucked under the microwave envelopes marked Urgent One with a red stamp across the front that said, "Final Notice." She never mentioned them. The mailbox groaned with late fees and lien threats. The wallpaper in the hallway had started peeling. The bathroom ceiling dripped when it rained. And yet we all kept pretending the floor wasn't shifting beneath us. Ryan was somewhere in Colorado then, living in a Mountain View condo, or maybe Bali, I don't remember. He posted photos of smoothies and sunrises of his fiancée's sapphire ring and his dog's birthday party. He didn't ask about home. He didn't ask about Mom's hospital stays, or Dad's silence, or the final notice pinned to the fridge like a grocery list. I didn't tell him either. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I refinanced the house under my name. I took out a business loan against my freelance design income, the same income no one ever really understood but always thanked when the lights stayed on. I worked 60-hour weeks from the guest room, sleeping next to spreadsheets and legal pads, ate boxed macaroni and gas station soup, and kept the heat at 62 all winter. The foreclosure letters stopped coming. That was the only sign that anything had changed. No one asked me how. They were just relieved the panic had passed. Dad said, "Well, thank God for miracles." Mom smiled and started planting her garden again, even though she never planted it, and I let them believe it had been luck or grace or timing, because I wasn't doing it for credit. I wasn't saving the house for applause. I was doing it for what the house had been. The creaky third step on the staircase that always gave me away during late-night fridge raids. The scorch mark on the deck from the time Ryan lit fireworks too close to the grill. The floral wallpaper Mom had picked in 1998, peeling now but still holding the scent of lemon cleaner and old Sunday afternoons. Some people say a house is just walls and wires, but this one was stitched with memory, with the quiet kind of love no one noticed until it was gone. He showed up on a Wednesday. No warning, no call. Just the sound of tires crunching over the gravel driveway, followed by the familiar screech of the screen door opening like it still belonged to him. I was in the kitchen drying dishes when I heard Mom gasp. "Pumpkin," she whispered. Her whole face lit up like she'd just stepped into a memory. Ryan stood in the entryway with 2 pieces of monogrammed luggage and a too white smile. He was dressed in something expensive-looking and rumpled like he'd tried and failed to look effortless. The smell of citrus cologne followed him in like fog. He walked over to Mom, kissed her cheek with dramatic slowness, then turned to Dad and clapped his shoulder. "Still got that recliner, huh? Pops?" Dad chuckled and nodded, eyes soft in a way I hadn't seen in years. I stayed in the kitchen doorway, dish towel still damp in my hands. He didn't look at me. Not a nod, not a flicker. Just like that, he was home again, and I was already fading from the picture. Later that night, I overheard the pieces. The startup he'd built in Denver collapsed after a series of lawsuits. His marriage had ended after something to do with property disputes, whose name was on what, who paid for which. The ring, the condo, the dog, they were all gone. He needed time to regroup, and he figured the family home would be a good place to reset. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how easily he made it sound like the house had just been there waiting for him, as if it hadn't nearly vanished, as if someone else hadn't fought to keep the roof from collapsing. He moved into the master bedroom like it had been reserved for him. His luggage landed hard on the hardwood floor. Margaret fluffed the pillows. George offered to bring up an extra blanket. No one asked me where I'd sleep. I returned to the guest room, the same one I'd turned into an office after paying off the mortgage. No one thanked me, but they had enough energy to fawn over Ryan's newest photos from a yoga retreat in Arizona and a half-joke about starting a real estate podcast. I thought of something Dad once said when I graduated college. "You're steady, Lisa. That's good. Just don't expect applause." He was right. I never expected it. But I didn't expect to be forgotten either. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about erosion. It's slow, almost gentle, until one day you realize the ground beneath you is gone. The first signs were small. Ryan moved my spices. Just rearranged them one afternoon without asking. When I mentioned it, he laughed. "You're so type A, Liz. Let a little chaos in." Then, Mom stopped making decaf in the mornings. She brewed Ryan's dark roast instead. When I asked about it, she just said, "Oh, I didn't think you needed it today." The rhythm shifted. They started talking over me at dinner. Conversations paused when I entered the room. The air changed, the weight of their glances not cruel, but excluding settled heavy across my shoulders. One evening, I opened the fridge and found my labeled leftovers missing. I asked Dad if he'd seen them. He didn't answer. Ryan smirked and said I thought it was up for grabs. I didn't argue. I just started writing my name in bigger letters. A week in Ryan suggested converting the den into a media room. The den had been mine. My office. My desk, my files, my calendar taped to the wall. He said he'd bring in a projector, maybe some beanbags. Dad nodded. That could be fun. I moved my desk back into the guest room. Margaret told me I was being tense. George said, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." But I wasn't the one making anything. I was just trying to keep still while the floor shifted. Then came the whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. I was standing inside the screen door, lights off. They were on the back porch, Mom, Dad, and Ryan, drinking wine and looking up at the sky like the future might fall from it. "She's always been so rigid," Ryan said. "She's tired," Mom replied. Then softer. "She holds on to things. Maybe it's time she found her own place." Dad didn't respond, but he didn't protest either. They didn't know I was there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there feeling something settle in my chest, like cold ash. That was the moment I understood this wasn't temporary. Ryan hadn't come back to heal. He came to reclaim, and they were ready to let him. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next morning. I didn't slam any doors. Didn't ask questions. I just pulled the old file folder from the bottom drawer of my nightstand, the one with the fraying corners and a single post-it stuck to the front keep. Always. Inside was everything. The deed signed and notarized, the refinance documents, the mortgage payoff receipt dated 18 months ago, property tax records, insurance confirmations, every envelope I'd opened, every late notice I'd silenced, all filed, labeled, and time-stamped. I laid the papers out across the bed like blueprints of something I'd built with my own hands. I ran my fingers along the edge of the deed, tracing the loop in my own signature. I hadn't looked at it in months, not because I'd forgotten it was mine, but because part of me still needed to believe I didn't have to prove it. Turns out I did. I added a copy of the letter from my attorney, Mr. Hernandez, the one who'd walked me through every clause like I was his daughter, not just a client. His name was printed at the top in serif font, followed by the line sole legal owner Lisa Ann Whitaker. No bold, no italics, just fact. I sat down at my desk and looked at the folder again. It didn't feel like revenge. It didn't even feel like anger. It felt like recognition, like the quiet, steady knowing of a person who'd been gaslit into thinking they were temporary in their own story. I closed the folder, slipped it into my tote bag, and set it by the door. It was roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes. That lemon vinaigrette salad Mom always made when she wanted things to feel normal. The table was set for 4. Ryan brought the wine, a deep red, in an overpriced bottle he'd picked up on the way home from yoga because of course he did. Dad carved the chicken with the same knife he'd used every Thanksgiving since 1992. Mom folded the napkins into the same little fans she used to make when we had company. But there wasn't anyone else coming. Just us. Just the 4 of us pretending. I didn't say much. I passed the bread. I refilled the water glasses. I watched them how they leaned toward Ryan when he talked, how they laughed too hard when he made some half-formed joke about cryptocurrency, how no one asked me about my day. Halfway through the meal, Ryan set down his wine glass with that theatrical little flourish he always used when he was about to perform. Then he smiled at me, like a cat that had already swallowed the bird. "You've got 7 days to move out." He said it like it was weather, like he was just reading it off the forecast. I blinked. Mom looked down at her plate. Dad reached for the salt. No one said a word. "Excuse me," I said quietly. Ryan tilted his head. His tone was syrup. "It's not personal, Liz. We just think it's time you moved on. You've been here a long time." "It's not healthy." I repeated. He nodded toward our parents like a lawyer presenting co-signers. "Mom and Dad agree," he said smoothly. Dad cleared his throat. "It's not about the house," he mumbled. "It's about peace. Harmony." "Peace," I echoed. "You think this is peace?" Ryan leaned forward, elbows on the table like we were gossiping over coffee. "Your energy," he said, "it's heavy." I almost laughed. This coming from the man who hadn't paid a single bill, who walked back in and acted like a king returning from exile. I set my fork down. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and placed it on the table. Opened it to the deed. "This house isn't yours to give." Ryan stared at it like it was written in another language. Mom's eyes flicked from the page to my face, then back again. Dad's knife paused mid-cut. "I don't understand," Ryan said, his voice suddenly brittle. "It's real," I replied. "Signed, notarized, legally binding. I refinanced under my name, paid off the liens, covered the insurance, paid the taxes, repaired the roof, fixed the mold in the basement." I slid another page across the table. "This is from my attorney. If you want to call him, go ahead. He's on speaker." I dialed. 1 ring, 2. Then the voice of Mr. Hernandez came through the phone, steady and crisp. "Yes, the property is solely owned by Ms. Lisa Ann Whitaker. As of April 4th, 18 months ago." Silence. Ryan stood. His chair screeched against the floor. "So this is about control." "No," I said. "It's about respect," Mom whispered. "You're kicking out your family. I'm reclaiming what I built." I pulled out one last document, a printed letter with a blue stamp. "This is a formal eviction notice. You have 24 hours. After that, law enforcement gets involved. The locksmith comes tomorrow." Ryan's face twisted. "You wouldn't dare." "You dared first," I said. I didn't sleep that night. The house creaked the way old homes do when they're holding their breath. I heard drawers opening, the thud of boxes, the click of doors shutting just softly enough to pretend nothing was final. Their voices were muffled but not hushed, not secretive, just resigned. At 8:13 a.m., I heard Ryan's voice slice through the quiet like broken glass. "Just bring the truck around. I don't need help. I just need you to be fast." I didn't move. I didn't open my door. I didn't stand in the hallway to watch. I just sat at the edge of my bed with my hands in my lap, waiting for it to be over. Footsteps on the stairs, a bag dragging across the hardwood, then nothing. At 10:07, I finally stepped into the hallway. Empty. But the air felt charged, like the silence after lightning, just as loud as the strike itself. I passed the living room. Dad George was sitting in his old recliner facing the blank television screen, remote in hand, thumb resting on the power button. He didn't look up, didn't say my name. Just let me pass like I was a guest in my own hallway. In the kitchen, Mom Margaret was wrapping plates in newspaper, the fragile box already half full. She paused when she saw me. "Your father doesn't know where we'll go yet," she said softly, eyes still on the plate in her hands. "Emma offered her apartment for a while. It'll be cramped." I didn't answer. I just nodded once and reached for the kettle. "She didn't mean to," Mom began. "She did," I interrupted. "And you let her." Her shoulders fell. She didn't argue. She just picked up the next plate and kept wrapping. By 11:40 a.m., the front door opened and closed 3 times. Once for Ryan, once for Mom, once for Dad. No goodbyes, no slammed doors. Just the sound of departure, the hollow rush of wind pushing against the windows. At 12:03, I walked to the front door, locked it, turned the deadbolt slowly, felt it click into place. It was done. No yelling, no broken things, just a fracture deep, precise, clean. The kind that doesn't bleed on the outside, but never really heals. I walked through the house room by room. Nothing was left behind, but their presence still lingered. The faint scent of Dad's aftershave. Mom's gardening gloves forgotten on the windowsill. The perfume Ryan sprayed like ownership in the guest room. I didn't touch anything. Not yet. In the foyer, I found Dad's old station wagon key, the one he never used anymore, the one that still hung on the hook beside the door out of habit. I took it down, held it in my palm for a moment. Then I hung it again. Not for memory, not for mourning. Just to say this too is mine now. The first morning without them was quiet in a new way. Not the silence I'd grown used to, the kind filled with tension, with footsteps behind doors and whispered judgment. This was something else, clean, still, like the house had exhaled. I made coffee, sat by the window. For once, no one had claimed the best seat. The light poured through the glass, warming the wood floors Ryan used to track dirt across. I let it stretch across my toes and didn't move. By noon, I started with the master bedroom, the one he'd taken like it was owed to him. I opened every window, let the air move, peeled back the thick curtains Margaret had insisted on keeping for tradition's sake, repainted the walls a soft, neutral gray, not to erase what had been, but to give the room a voice that didn't echo someone else's. I hung a single photo above the bed, me arms outstretched on a mountain trail in Montana. No one else in the frame. Just sky and quiet. Next was the hallway. I took down the old family portraits, not to destroy them, but to stop them from looming. I wrapped each one in brown paper and slid them into a box marked "Memories Not Altars." I placed the box in the attic. In the garden, I pulled out Mom's roses. They'd been dying for years. She never watered them, but insisted we keep them because they were Dad's favorite. Instead, I planted lavender and rosemary plants that don't beg for attention but bloom if given enough space and sun. Each act was a decision, not of grief but of ownership. I fixed the creaky stair Ryan always complained about, replaced the light bulb in the attic, donated the old recliner, the one Dad used to sink into like silence. The guest room, my room again, became a real office. I set up a new desk, a lamp, left the windows uncovered so the afternoon light could spill in. I cooked dinner for one, ate at the kitchen table without music, without conversation. And then slowly I began to allow other sounds in, music from my old CD player, the soft scrape of my chair against the floor, laughter my own when I spilled tea on the rug and didn't have to apologize. The house began to respond, not with noise but with breath. It stopped feeling haunted, stopped echoing with almosts. It started to feel like mine, not in paperwork, but in presence. It came on a Tuesday, tucked between a utility bill and a coupon flyer, a plain white envelope with no return address. But I recognized the handwriting instantly looped and careful, each letter curved like it had been practiced on birthday cards and school permission slips. Margaret's handwriting. I stood by the mailbox for a long time, just holding it. The paper was warm from the sun. I thought briefly about tossing it unopened, not out of anger, just disinterest, like returning to a book I'd already finished. Still, I opened it. 2 pages, neat. No corrections, no apology. She said she forgave me for what she didn't say, only that she hoped I'd come to my senses one day, that Ryan had been trying his best, that they were managing in the apartment Emma let them use even if it was small and not ideal. She ended with, "We still love you, Lisa, even if we don't understand you anymore." I read it once, then again. Then I folded it precisely and dropped it into the bin beside the recycling, not as a gesture, not to be dramatic, just because I didn't need it. I didn't need forgiveness for defending my home. I didn't need love wrapped in conditions or sentences that ended in even if. For so long I had begged for crumbs, validation, kindness, the smallest sign that they saw me, but now I was full. The silence that followed their absence wasn't empty anymore. It was clear. I didn't write back. I didn't bring up the letter, didn't reread it. I let it sit where I'd dropped it beneath a stack of unread coupons and junk mail. Some stories don't need answers. I poured tea, sat by the window, and let the afternoon light stretch across the new lavender plants. They were blooming now, small, deliberate, steady. The house no longer echoed. It held, not gently, not perfectly, but honestly. There were still things left undone. A chipped tile in the kitchen, a creak in the floor by the hallway closet, the smell of lemon cleaner clinging faintly to the baseboards. I didn't fix all of it. Some of it I kept, as proof that things don't have to be flawless to be real. I stopped waiting to be seen, stopped shrinking myself to fit into a version of the past that never made room for me. I didn't close the door out of anger. I closed it because it had been open too long, and because I finally could.